Hi there. This is Angie Sheets, and I'm joined today with my partner, Nicole Wingate, and we're excited to be here with you this afternoon. We're in Indiana, so we've had a lot of snow heading our way. We've had lots of e-learning days and snow days, so we're back at school today. So we're happy to be with you this afternoon and share a little bit about Tell Me More and Descriptive Teaching. There we go.
All right, like Angie said, I'm Nicole Wingate. I am a speech-language pathologist. I work in a public school setting in Bluffton, Indiana.
And I'm Angie Sheets. I am an intensive interventions teacher and in an elementary school in Bluffton as well. We have students grades K through 4 with most significant needs. A lot of students with orthopedic impairments and communication challenges as well. And we've just kind of been finding our own way and working our way through the concepts of AAC and figuring out what will work with our students, helping to raise those expectations for them and provide the support that they need to be successful.
We are also co-owners of Speak Up LLC. We do online training, webinars, presentations, and consultations. Our learning objectives today, we will be learning about selecting AAC vocabulary through strategic assessment, developing teaching methods with respect to core vocabulary and academic standards, and guidance for utilizing standardized assessments, including those with complex needs who may not have an elaborate form of communication. So we're going to go ahead and look at selecting AAC in vocabulary. As you can see, I have a wide range of different types of AAC up here. Sometimes I feel like it could just be an overwhelming process. Where exactly do we start, especially with the development of technology and all of the communication apps that are out there? There's so many no-tech, low-tech, and high-tech options. And I've also struggled with the fact that what I think may be right or the best option for the student may not be, and as well as the cost that goes along with that. But it's our obligation to give those students the right to communicate and also have access to their curriculum. Because if they don't have that Tier 1 support, that Tier 1 level of communication, how can they access their curriculum? So
I think as a teacher, too, just this whole idea of picking a different piece, picking an item, picking a tool can be so overwhelming and crazy, because if I don't know how to utilize the tool, I have this fear and this anguish of, oh my gosh, what if I do it wrong? Oh my gosh, what if I don't do it the right way? Oh my gosh, what if I mess it up? Oh my gosh, what if I don't know how to program it? Oh my gosh, what if I don't have time to learn all the ins and outs? But it's just taking that step and doing it, because doing something is better than doing nothing. So getting over ourselves and putting ourselves at the back and saying, it's not about me, it's about finding what's right for my students, and trying to push down some of those fears that we have.
And not giving up. Trying one thing may not be the best option, but then you just keep trying and you keep finding something else to try to utilize. So that goes into our next slide, is utilizing that assistive technology team. So when looking at an assistive technology evaluation, we really need to be looking at that child from head to toe. So with that being said, with the SLP may having that expertise in AAC, I'm going to need to call upon my colleagues when I'm looking at access, when I'm looking at positioning, mobility, vision, hearing. I have learned so much from our assistive technology team and those specialists on that team. I had been trying, for a few years to find a different mode for a student to communicate, and finding out, oh my goodness, if I stabilize the core, it can lead to less spasticity and you have more range of motion to be able to directly select something. So just really not being the Lone Ranger and doing it all by yourself, but calling upon that assistive technology coordinator, your OTs, your PTs, blind low vision specialists, deaf and hard of hearing specialists, special education teachers, our instructional assistants. Sometimes our instructional assistants have the best insight because they're with our students throughout the day. And then also not forgetting those parents. Those parents are also a key role in that assistive technology team.
So let's go ahead and take a look and see who's here today. You guys can click in if any of those titles fit you there. See who's joining us. The speech paths are racking it up here. Looks like we have quite a few speech pathologists today. All right, hi guys. And a few assistive tech coordinators. So thanks for tuning in with us. All right. So Nicole, you ready to talk about the Sett Framework a little bit?
So one of the tools that we use in our school district is the Sett Framework, and that's what we use to guide us in the IEP to consider AT. Does this student need an assistive technology evaluation? And if we can look at the Sett Framework and look at the physical part of it, the sensory, communication, cognition, academic performance, environmental control, social competence, vocational competence, or vocational performance, recreation and leisure, and then any others. So are there any of these areas that the student is not independent with or not able to access their educational performance? So if any of these are marked, then we would go ahead and continue filling this out to consider an assistive technology evaluation.
And this is a free document, and the link to acquire that document is at the top, thejoysofala.com.
And there is a second page to that on our next screen here. So also when we're filling this out, we then go ahead and look at who's going to be responsible for what. Look at the areas, the functional capabilities that are currently concerned, the specific tasks in this area that are difficult or impossible at this time, and then special strategies, accommodations, and tools that are currently being used to lower barriers to the task. And then are there continuing barriers encountered when the student attempts this task? And then describe new or additional assistive technology to be tried to address during continuing those barriers, or indicate a need for further investigation. So it really just does help guide us and guide our team into that assistive technology evaluation.
So I know as a classroom teacher, the last thing that I want is one more piece of paper to fill out. The last thing that I want is one more piece of paper to be responsible for. The last thing that I want is one more chart that I have to take any data on. But even if you don't use a specific chart or the specific paper, knowing that there are assigned people on your tasks assigned to specific people on your team to make sure that things get done, I think that's a really critical part of this.
Absolutely.
Making sure that you are looking at the child as a whole, and then making sure that your whole team has a part in accomplishing the needs and fulfilling the needs of the student.
And then after this, I mean, there's several different AT and AAC evaluation tools that you can use, such as the WADI, the QWOT, AAC Evaluation Genie, Communication Matrix, Every Move Counts. There's lots of other, several no-cost to low-cost tools that can be utilized throughout the evaluation process. And that takes us into considerations for selection. So again, first and foremost, remember to include the parents as part of this team and to get their input because they want to be there with their children at home and out in the community. And so we need to know what's important to them. So what do we want the student to be able to do? What communication is required and with who? How do you envision student participation? What can the student already do? That's a really important piece to look at, especially when we're looking at Every Move Counts. What can the student already do? How are they already able to communicate? What needs to be added? What are priorities and compromises? Is the iPad the best way to achieve this? Or are there other avenues, such as a speech-generating device, or are there AT considerations that need to be considered with just different, like table stands or wheelchair mounts and things like that? And then what kind? You need an app. So there's also a rubric that is a rubric for evaluating the language of apps for AAC, and there is...
I'm going to try and share a screen here so you can see, so bear with me for a second. I'm going to my applications. Yes?
In Chrome. Hopefully you'll be able to see this.
All right. Hoping you can see our screen here.
So this is from Practical AAC, and this is just a rubric for evaluating the language of apps for AAC. So you can look at the different communication apps and look at the object action request choices. It doesn't support, there's little support, some support, considerable support, and it fully supports. So like I said, there are so many different communication apps out there, and this is just a tool for you to be able to sift through those and see what's going to be best for your student.
We love finding tools like this, especially those freebies that are loaded in Practical AAC. Just another piece to put in your toolbox there, and whenever you have that need arise. All right, let's see. There you go.
And here we've just put some different companies and agencies locally to us, but borrow, borrow, borrow. Once you have determined the type of communication app or the type of speech-generating device, just start borrowing. So the local vendors, you can borrow from them. Usually they're 1-month trials, but we have Prunky Romy, Lamports for Life, Tobii Dynavox. AbleNet also has a lending library that you can borrow from. In the state of Indiana, we have patents, so that's our state-level technology library, and we are constantly just borrowing. Also, Easter Seals is another good way to borrow devices. Get your hands on devices and tools, and like I said, once one thing doesn't work, then try something else. And I wish I could just turn on a camera right now and show you my room, because I currently have table stands, I have a Tobii device here, I have a Saltillo device, I have my iPad, and I probably have 4 boxes behind me because I just continually, start borrowing, and then I'll borrow something, and then my cohort, Angie, then she'll borrow the next time, and we just keep trialing different things with our students to see what's going to be the best fit.
You can find that rubric.
And here's another thing. There's a question here, does Tobii Dynavox offer free loans? My answer to that is yes. And here's what I would tell you. I would tell you to become friends with your local rep. We've become really good friends with our rep from Prunky Romy, PRC, and then also Tobii Dynavox. And so you just invite them in. And I know it can be a little bit intimidating and, oh my goodness, what if I'm not doing something right? But invite them in. Actually, our PRC rep, she is actually the one who got us started and was like, you know what, you guys need to present. You guys need to share your story and share what you've learned. And so she has really been intricate in our journey as well. But, however, where I'm going with this is invite them in, let them see their students. They will give you suggestions. They're not going to do an AAC evaluation, but they'll give you suggestions. They'll work with your staff. They'll do mini trainings. They are wonderful. And then, so how this works is sometimes your reps, they'll have their personal devices. Sometimes they'll be allowed to leave something with you for a month, and then guess what? They have to come back and pick it up. So you set a time for them to come back and pick it up, but they need to stay a little while as well. So that you can go over with them, like how did this go, what questions you have. And then we've also done this with our Tobii Dynavox rep as well. She just left us with an eye gaze device, and she's like, do you guys have a box? Do you want to send that back? And we're like, I bet you just want to come back and pick that up, don't you? So we set up a time for about 6 weeks out, and she's going to come back and visit. And then we also correspond through email, or also just a short little webinar too if we have questions, so she can walk us through different things that we don't understand. So, but yeah, become friends with those reps. That's what they're there for. They're there to help us learn, help us grow, and they're also there for our parents as well.
And I sometimes become a nag about it, but you don't know what you don't know, and they don't know what I don't know unless I ask. So it's okay to ask those questions. That's their job, is to be there to answer those questions for us. And the more that I can get them in my room, I might be targeting a specific student, but the more that I can get that rep in my classroom to see all of my students, the more ideas might be generated, the more aha moments might happen. So yes, trying to get those people through your classroom doors with any of your students that you have questions or concerns about. They're the ones who have access to the goods, and so we want to be their best buds.
And then, okay, so I don't know if you know as well that you can also host a LAMP Words for Life training through the Center for AAC and Autism. So if you are a host, you have to, go through a little process and application. Sometimes it's a year wait. But if you host that, you can host that for free, and you get like 10 free slots. And then I recommend doing is it the 2.5 day or the 1.5 day? I don't know. But the one where they actually come the day before and they video some of your students and they work with your students, that was absolutely
invaluable.
Yes, so we were able to see them in action with our students and how this really works, and then we were able to have 10 free slots for the training as well. So, okay. So then that brings us to collecting data, the part that we all love, right? So we need to establish a pre-intervention baseline. So basically, when we go back to that, what can our students already do? What are they doing? So we need to see what they can do and then what we're going to take data on. So having clear expectations on the data being collected, collect data on the student's performance with the AAC trial, and you may have different pieces of AAC that you are trialing and collecting data on. And then I also like to use the same form, even if I am collecting data on 2 different speech-generating devices or programs. And then the data should be collected by various members of the assistive technology team. Again, the SLP can't be the lone ranger in this, so utilizing our special education teacher. I train instructional assistants on how to take data, also our assistive technology coordinator, and then myself as well. And then analyzing that data for the AAC selection. So I'm trying to see if there's anything I missed. I don't think so.
So Nicole, when you're looking at that data, and sometimes I've submitted data to you, sometimes assistants, as you mentioned, what are the trends you're looking for? What do you want to see from that data that's going to say, ooh, this is driving me towards a specific device?
So I want to see throughout the day, are there certain times of the day when the student is utilizing that speech-generating device more? I also want to look to see, what level of independence do they have with that device, or how much prompting and modeling do they need with that device. Also, what types of words they're able to utilize, what they're motivated by. Okay.
So that's going to drive the process of what device we're acquiring then, as to how the next steps are going to be how we're going to implement this in the classrooms and the students' day-to-day life.
All right, that brings us to core vocabulary. We're not going to go over core vocabulary a ton, but just a quick overview. Core vocabulary is the 350 most frequent words in a person's speech that accounts for 80% of the actual words spoken. And what's nice about core vocabulary in the academic setting as well is that 84% of those core words are adult words. So how sweet is that, is that I'm able to tie that core vocabulary back to academic content. If we go to the next slide here, this is from Beth Ahmad, and this is 50 of the first core words. And I think we have a little, I'm going to try to share our screen here a second. Yeah. Yep. So here are is the actual list, and it goes by the first 8, 15, 30, 50, and then adding to the first 50 to get 300 plus core words. We have found really starting with the core vocabulary too helps the students be able to utilize a lot more words used in a variety of contexts.
I kind of think of it as recycling. We're recycling those same words to be used over and over. Okay, so one of the best things about utilizing the core vocabulary is that it transcends its usage across all areas. Like I said, it's recyclable. I don't have to create a specific board for science. I don't have to create a specific communication board for math, a specific board for reading, a specific board for art. And then within those, and when in reading, I don't have to create a specific board for each story that we're focusing on or each genre that we're focusing on. I'm going to be able to use that same core vocabulary over and over and over, with a few additional fringe words to have a fully functioning communication system that can be generalized across settings and contexts. So I always go back to, like, before I knew about AAC and before I knew about core vocabulary, I used to make topic boards for everything. And what I found myself doing was cutting and pasting and cutting and pasting and laminating and cutting and pasting and laminating. And I hate doing that. That's so time consuming. So learning about core vocabulary totally changed my approach to instruction with my students, because the core can transcend, like I said, all of those different areas that we are responsible for teaching our students. But core vocabulary alone makes it difficult to get all of our points across and expand on what our students know and expand on how they're able to express themselves. So adding that fringe vocabulary. When we're talking about fringe are those outlying words outside of the core vocabulary that add a little more meaning, a little more frosting to the cake, a little more flavor there. So it is kind of an art in learning how to focus first on that core vocabulary and then building with those fringe words. So hopefully today we can help generate some of those pieces for you to make it a little more practical. So that's where we're heading. So one way that we make sure that we have reinforced that core vocabulary, basic understanding, is we like to do circuit training. We've been able to utilize our related service staff as well as parent volunteers in addition to classroom staff to build experiences to incorporate vocabulary instruction along with academic instruction. And circuit training is essentially just center rotations, but it's in short bursts of intensive instruction, like 6 to 7 minute sessions that are jam-packed with hands-on experiences. So when going this route, it's important to plan ahead, and we send out these plans to our staff ahead of time. So on Saturdays or Sundays, I usually email bomb all of my staff so they're ready to go. We prep all the materials, have our visual supports ready to roll too. And you can find more explicit instructions about how we do this on the site that's listed at the top of the slide. And this has been a quick and fun way to incorporate vocab instruction while also practicing transitions within a familiar environment. So it's like bigger bang for your buck there, because a lot of my students have difficulty transitioning as well. So when we can add those transition pieces into getting a core vocab review, it just helps all of us. I call this circuit training because I used to go to, you guys remember, they used to have these curves workout centers. Hang tight here, we got a few questions coming in. We used to go to these curves workout centers, and they used to have you work really hard for like 2 minutes at a session, then you at a station, and then you move to the next station and work really hard again. And I was like, whoa, if this can help people lose weight or get stronger, then maybe I need to take the same approach to my classroom. So that's what we did, was heading with the core circuit review to make sure that we are reinforcing those pieces that we're teaching, making it functional, making it meaningful, making it fun, making it engaging as well. We're going to hop in here and answer a question real quick.
Do you want to show the core vocabulary?
We've got a question that says, to get free LAMP training, do you have to have students already on Words for Life?
No. We didn't have any students on Words for Life at that point.
Okay, and are you able to use a device to figure out what a person's core vocabulary might be?
There are some certain data tracking pieces on the different device that you utilize that will help track what words a student is using.
So, like realized language, you might track what they're using as well. But a person's core vocabulary is core vocabulary.
Right.
For everyone. These are the most commonly used words for everyone. All right.
I mean, I guess you would know what they're using independently, but then we explicitly teach those core vocabulary words on a weekly basis and take data on that as well.
Okay, so we're digging into the meat here. Developing the teaching methods with respect to the standards. So in Indiana, we have our academic standards, and we also have our content connectors. Those are our related standards, our alternative standards, we refer to them as. And when I initially glanced at those standards, it's so easy to be overwhelmed by the vast array of educational aspects that I'm held accountable to. Seriously, I'm an old-time teacher, so when I went to college to learn how to be a special educator, we were looking at all of what we called the life skills at that point. So we were looking at folding laundry, sorting laundry, washing dishes, prepping a meal, all of what we consider those life skills. And now I'm teaching a lot more heavily into language arts, a lot more heavily into mathematics beyond time and money, working more on geometry and composition and calculation. So in addition to teaching, I also have to consider the student responses and make sure that my students have an accessible and equitable way to give that response to indicate their understanding of the application of concepts. And this is so intimidating to me because I don't have that experience. So I'm learning with my students. I'm learning on their devices. I am learning right along beside them as far as what kind of responses do I want them to be able to give to me? What am I looking for? And this is where the descriptive teaching comes into play. So I start with the standards list developed by my state. And then a group of teachers, myself included, we went to a brainstorming session. And we formed a year-long planning guide to help us determine which standards would be taught during which grading period. So it's just kind of chunked it out for us, broke it down. And from the year-long planning guide, then I created my own map for my classroom. And this is where I really got to personalize pieces. I got to push into those spots the pieces of literature that I love, the games, and the hands-on activities that I've just always found successful and that I know will grab my kids' attention. And that also helps to get their buy-in then. And as part of that map, I include a dedicated portion to core vocabulary to make sure that I'm explicitly teaching the vocabulary that my students will need to participate in the lesson. So this map is shared with everyone on the team, and it truly takes a village to make this happen. So once again, I start with that huge overlying umbrella of those content connectors. Then I break it down into 9-week sessions, and then I break it down into week-by-week sessions, and I add in there what are those content connectors that we're going to target, and I start figuring out the core vocabulary that we're going to use to help target it, and add in the specific activities that I love and I want to make sure are incorporated in my classroom as well.
So with that, since she sends that out to everyone on the team, as a speech-language pathologist, I'm able to go in and look at, okay, we're at September on week 2 in science and social studies. She's targeting the life cycle of the butterfly. In math, she's targeting patterning and reading the caterpillar. So, of course, we choose, okay, the hungry caterpillar. So one of the ways that we help motivate our students are we make these Word of the Week videos. And we're going to show you the hungry caterpillar video, but that just shows a different way that our students can learn by seeing, and also seeing students that they know, also seeing students with devices, and then we'll go back and we'll replay this during our teaching session and utilize these words on their devices.
Welcome to a special edition of the Word of the Week. We are reviewing the words big, little, eat, and look.
A little leg lay on a leaf. Out of the egg came a tiny and hungry caterpillar. He started to look for some food. On Monday, he's eating 1 apple. Eat 2 pears. On Wednesday, he is eating 3 plums. On Thursday, he is eating 4 strawberries. On Friday, he is eating 5 oranges.
Yesterday, he ate through 1 piece of chocolate cake, 1 ice cream cone, 1 pickle, 1 slice of Swiss cheese, 1 slice of salami, 1 lollipop, 1 piece of cherry pie, 1 sausage, 1 cupcake, and 1 slice of watermelon. That night, he had a stomach ache.
He wasn't a hungry caterpillar anymore. He was a big fat one. He built a little house that is called a cocoon. It's a beautiful butterfly.
So that's just an example of one of our Word of the Week videos. And like I said, we try to incorporate those when we're teaching that core vocabulary. And our students are highly motivated by these videos because they see people that they know and that they can relate to. So I highly recommend utilizing that in your teaching. All right, so that brings us to descriptive teaching. So using a descriptive style, the teacher mentions and references the context, specific words, then teaches concepts behind words using high-frequency, reusable common words. And that was by Gail Van Tatenhove. And so we're looking at context-specific references and core-to-teach concepts. So when we're looking at descriptive teaching, they use core vocabulary to describe. It promotes a higher level of thinking, and it's more time efficient. When we're looking at referential teaching, you're looking at asking specific questions. It uses less frequent vocabulary and focuses on more retrieval skills, and it can be more time-consuming. So for example, if we're looking at the science lesson, and you're talking about the different planets, in descriptive style teaching, you would ask the student to tell me about, describe, what are the similarities and differences? How and when would you use that? Instead of, what planet is this? You know, they may have the word Saturn, maybe you'll program that in their device, but how often are they going to use the word Saturn? Probably not that often. But tell me about Saturn. It has a big ring. All of those words are going to be in their device. They have access to them at all times. So they're able to describe and tell you about their answers than programming a specific word that they may never use again or maybe use less frequently.
So as a teacher, this is a big win-win for me because the last thing that I want to do is go to all my students' devices and make sure they're programmed in content-specific words for each topic that they're studying across the grade levels. That's impossible for me to do. And if any of you are doing it, woohoo to you, because I can't. I don't have the time or the energy to do that, but making sure that we are utilizing those core vocabulary words to be more descriptive in nature and modeling those descriptions with our students, we're allowing them to utilize their functional vocabulary to the greatest extent.
So another tool that I love to use when teaching descriptions is the Expanding Expression tool, the EET, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with this by Sarah Smith. She's the creator of the Expanding Expression tool. But this is a great tool to use with our students. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide just to show. Let's go to here, yes. So you can see we were utilizing pumpkins. We have pumpkin-flavored Cheerios, we have pumpkin-flavored cookies, we had a pumpkin, we had little pumpkins and big pumpkins, and we had our little EET tool. But the students are able to use their speech-generating devices and to expand that vocabulary using that EET tool.
So we were able to talk about all these centers and all these pieces of the lesson without having to add any additional vocabulary. We were able to use the core vocabulary that we had already learned and had already focused on in a new way. So I think we have this in our share again. Hang tight. So we have this is how we did it in my classroom. And as I mentioned in the beginning, our students have multiple and severe disabilities. So we assigned each group a color to go along with their EET tool. And so this group had the color green, so that was their group. So we were looking at what group does the pumpkin belong to, and we were using the core vocabulary. Eat is food that we eat. What do you do with that item? So we were looking at the blue dot. We went through each of the EET beads to help describe what we were looking for. And we were able to use this as a writing assignment and utilizing the student's device.
Welcome to another episode of Patents TV. I'm Jessica Conrad, one of the patent specialists. Today we're going to explore 2 simple supports that can help everyone in a classroom understand instruction and show what they know. Several years ago, I worked with a 3rd grader named Evan. When I worked with Evan, he couldn't answer basic questions like knowing pizza was a type of food or identifying a character in the short story he just read. He could read aloud fluently, so well you would imagine he understood what he said, but then he couldn't say what happened in it, let alone write about the story. The whole team was worried he wasn't demonstrating the skills he needed to stay on diploma track. As it turns out, what we needed was to show the material in a slightly different way, and what worked for him were several multisensory supports. I'm going to show you 2 supports that we have in our no-cost lending library for you to try to see if it could help support an Evan in your life. This one is called the Expanding Expression Tool. This is a tool to help students draw out prior knowledge and help us provide visual, tactile, and kinesthetic support to the concepts we present in instruction. For example, Evan, who couldn't tell me that pizza was a food, could tell me with a regular KWL chart that he liked pepperoni pizza, it's a triangle, and that you can taste it. That's all I thought he knew about pizza, just 3 details. Not much to go on if this was a writing prompt. With this type of visual support for vocabulary, he was able to draw out 23 details from his prior knowledge. The tool is designed to probe for a variety of information beyond what do I know. He knew the ingredients, where he could get pizza, he knew what to do with pizza, the color, shape, and size of it. That is a start to an interesting writing sample and showed me he knew a lot more than I thought he did. He still didn't understand what category pizza belonged in, but with a little extra instruction, he was categorizing all sorts of concepts. By the end of the year, recognizing relationships between vocabulary concepts is a skill he will use every day in class. What I love about this tool is that it's very simple. Teachers can start working with it in minutes, and it supports students from preschool all the way to college. Evan can use this one tool to demonstrate his deep understanding of the theorems in geometry or write a biography about Rosa Parks. The second
All right, we're going to stop Jessica there. We love our friends at Patents. They help to guide us in our resource selection and let us borrow tools for them as well. That was just Jessica's overview of the EET tool.
And I've always used the EET tool in my language therapy, but just expanding that and using it with my kids with AAC devices has just helped expand their vocabulary as well.
Another tool that I like to use to help me consider what core vocabulary I need to generate as a model for my students, I like to use this ABC poster. It's also called the Detail Machine, and it is available through Smeckens Education Solutions. There's a free download for a 9x13 version or a larger poster version. It's also available for those $3. Once again, that's from Smeckens Education Solutions. I use this concept to help gear up my brain to think in a more descriptive manner when teaching a concept that I kind of struggle with to compose a vocabulary. So what words am I going to need to teach my kids is what I'm thinking here. So finding those words that will utilize the words that my students already have the easiest access to, that core vocabulary. For some of my students with more complex needs, a big part of their communication considerations needs to be conserving energy. So the least amount of hits needed to get the big picture and express that needed phrase. So this is how it works. You go, the vendor's name again, sorry, answering a question, is from Smeckens Education Solutions. We can type that in the answer box here for you. Not able to see our slide. Okay, hang tight here. Can you see us now?
Yep.
Okay. So this is how I use the ABC poster or the detail machine. I listed at the top of the slide, I have my state standard. So in the black portion up there, I select the standard that I'm working on. I use the ABC chart to examine my core vocabulary that's easily accessible and that's frequently utilized by all of my students across multiple devices and systems. So then I go through the vocab list. I jot down the words that I can use to help describe the concepts that I'll be teaching. What words are going to help me get that point across, help me paint that picture of the concept that I need to convey, and what words do my students need to practice using in this concept to gain understanding and demonstrate concept mastery. So in the center, I add those crucial fringe words and the academic vocabulary. Just because we're focusing a lot on the core vocabulary doesn't mean that I want to avoid the academic vocabulary. It doesn't mean that I want to avoid those fringe words. Those are ways that we're going to expand on their core vocabulary. There are still some very important concepts and words that need to be taught, but this chart helps me realize that there are many, many more frequently used words at my disposal that I can help drive that concept and help my students develop that deeper thinking without having to add a bazillion words to each of their systems. So I selected a math standard at the top, select the appropriate tool for measurement, length, weight, and temperature. So I'm trying to go through my core vocab list. What words are going to help drive that concept? So I just go through the alphabet then. I can use the words all, almost, and I just go through letter by letter and trying to come up with what core words do my students already have access to that are going to help with that concept mastery. And then in the middle, there's so fewer words that I actually have to teach or program in or think of a different way to explain. So my fringe words are going to be my icing on the cake, and those academic words are the words that I want to make sure they're hearing and have an understanding of, but I'm going to use my core words on the outside for that expressive understanding. All right, so we first learned about descriptive teaching from Gail Van Tatenhove, and she developed this type of form to help with the descriptive lesson development as well. So kind of the same concept, just in a different format. The content words are the concepts on the left, and the descriptive words on the right. So core vocabulary and the development there and the understanding of descriptive teaching, giving your students the power to utilize their words in multiple ways is super important for lesson mastery, but also for safety of our individuals.
Hi. Wait. More. I wait more.
Well, John, you've told me quite a story. Why don't you hit Speak Display so everybody can hear the whole story? Thank you.
It was time to eat. I wait and wait. No one there. No one comes. I'm afraid no one here will help me eat. I wait more. She come and say to me you don't tell. She bad and mean. She go away. I wait more.
Well, I'm glad you could tell me about it. Is there something you need me to do to fix it? You can take care of it yourself. Excellent.
The gentleman in the video, he utilized the majority of core vocabulary, but in a very descriptive manner. He was able to use those words to describe situations which none of us ever, would want to experience. But he was able to master his language and his language system to describe a very authentic experience that held up in litigation. So I'm hoping that I can empower my students to have that same power over their vocabulary, to be able to describe what's happening to them, what's happening around them, what they're feeling, what their wants are, what their needs are, and beyond. But what about those times when we do need a program, when core vocabulary just isn't enough? When are those times? How do we determine when it's acceptable to add that word? The rules of thumb are, will the word be used frequently throughout the user's lifespan? So we do have some students who have some different preoccupations with certain items or activities. I've heard some people talk that they have had students who had a preoccupation with vacuum cleaners, or with somebody had an occupation with porta pots, and so those were words that they were programming into their systems because they were excessively important to that user. And the other rule of thumb is, does a word relate to a personalized specific interest? That's just what we had touched upon as well. So words that are going to be used consistently over and over, and they are important to that individual.
Something else that I've done too is most devices, they already have, family members in there, such as dad, mom, sister, brother, grandma. But I've gone ahead and I've left those words, just those words, because you want your student to be able to talk about their mom or my mom, but also maybe his mom or her mom. So mom in that context can be used for lots of different people's moms. So, but then I've gone ahead and I've programmed, that particular student's mom and dad. I use, real pictures and attach their names to it in their device beside the icon of mom. So there's mom that can be meant for anybody's mom, and then there's a picture of their particular mother or sister or dad.
All right, when I hear the word standardized assessment, I instantly cringe. My first thoughts are difficult content, difficult to administer, and inaccurate representation of what my students know. So many of the standardized assessments, they seem inevitable in the world of education. So if I can't beat them, I'm going to join them. And by that, I mean if I view the content as too difficult, I'm going to find a way to make the content more accessible and increase the accuracy of my teaching so that my students have the exposure that they need to master the concepts. If the test administration is too difficult, then I need to practice administering non-standardized assessments in a more systematic approach. If it's an inaccurate representation of what my students know, then I need to work with my students to increase the accuracy of their responses and help refine their response process to help them better convey their knowledge. All students want to show what they know. So if I have to use descriptive teaching methods, if I have to build upon my core vocabulary and increase the accessibility, that's part of my job. And I'll be honest with you, this is the part that I'm still learning. This is the part that I'm working on, and I'm learning more and more about it every day as I'm seeing that my students are so much more capable than what I had originally ever thought. So developing those means of response and being able to assess with AAC, utilizing core vocabulary and descriptive teaching, that's where we're moving towards. That's where we're hitting. Partner scanning through those options is a possibility, and making sure that students have a solid yes-no response can help students access the assessment process. And I love this video from We Speak Pod, love this family, and all that they have taught and bravely shared. They demonstrate indicating that yes-no response to make sure the responses are consistently recognized. So how does this play into the descriptive teaching piece? Well, in a couple different ways. We want to make sure that first of all, that we are exposing our students to a higher level of content, a higher level of expectations. And in doing that, we're utilizing that familiar vocabulary, building on it with the Fringe, and also exposing to the academic vocabulary and allowing them to respond with the means that they're able to respond to, and utilizing the systems that they are accurate with and learning as they're moving through their educational process. I think you can see these guys here.
I'm raising my hand. I'm looking at my wristband. I have something to say. I'm telling you something. It's time to, another word, back to page 1, do something. Turn the page, we are going to do yes and no head nods so that we can remember how to do them today. We're going to need lots of yes and no head nods today in school, okay? Who needs to come help us with our yes and no's? Who did we meet this week? Mrs. Yes, Mrs. Yes, Beyonce. All sing the ladies, all sing the ladies, all sing the ladies, all sing the ladies. All right, Mrs. Yes, Mr. No, Mr. No. All right, let's start with our girl Beyonce. Ready?
So we saw the mom in the video, how she was trying to specifically teach that yes and that no. Specifically be able to use those body movements, those gestures of the head to be able to indicate their responses in reflection to more challenging vocabulary pieces when we're looking at those assessment options for our students. Linda Burkhart and Gail Porter, they state that partner-assisted scanning can be an effective approach with children who face significant motor and communication challenges, beginning communicators or children who don't have any effective forms of communication, struggling device users, and when other communication strategies are not available or effective at the moment. So partners providing that scanning by showing, pointing, and or speaking the names of items. Communication partners offer an indication of selection. It's kind of the how-to of how to go about it. I find the hardest part is finding that yes-no response that some of my students with the most complex bodies have to offer. This young man has a more hidden
so it's room
yes,
7
no
of the
response.
lobby.
I don't think we're going to have time
So
for the whole
Jill,
video, but it's going to
Betty,
give
and
you an idea
Tova
here.
in room 7. Mark and Elaine in the lobby. So would you like to go visit Jill in her room? If you want to go visit Jill, I need a nice clear smile. Use your voice. Do you want to go visit Mark? If you'd like to go visit Mark, use your smile. Use your voice. There's a little smile. Is that the person you want to go visit? If you'd like to go visit Mark, nice and clear, use your smile. Now we got a little smile there. Well, let's see. What would you like to do with Mark? So let's get your choices. All right, so let's go with Mark. He did give a little grin there.
So the really important part of this is that we're offering options for our students to give the response in addition to utilizing our descriptive teaching methods so that we're using vocabulary that our students understand, that our students have access to, and that our students are able to respond to. I also think that it's really important that we're giving our students a means to go back and erase. You know, all typical students taking an assessment have a means to go back, erase, have a chance to do a do-over. And we need to make sure that our students have that same access. And that could be an oops sticker, a gesture, a facial expression that indicates do-over. Some sort of predetermined expression that allows students to make a correction, to correct a mistake, if one would ever happen to occur. And whatever expression is agreed upon, make sure that your student has an opportunity to practice their oops response prior to an assessment. Vertical scanning sheets or selections on note cards, wipe-up boards, or voice output options may also be appropriate for assessment responses. And I like to practice these going into like the reading A to Z or the epic pieces that give you those multiple choice options that are very powerful and very helpful prior to assessments.
So our process is easy. Model use of vocabulary while teaching academic concepts. Provide activities and hands-on practice to utilize vocabulary with academic content. Create assessment response options with respect to the communication system. And we have found that using more of a go and show approach when teaching vocabulary, our students are much more motivated than trying to sit and get. So really creating those hands-on and movement opportunities so that they can develop that vocabulary and attach meaning to it. Make sure that adults are using the devices while instructing, modeling, give multiple exposures to the response expectations and procedures. We do a lot of hands-on and all hands on deck. I'll go into Angie's classroom. We'll have her assistants available, all the students available, so we have multiple people able to model on those devices and give more of that one-on-one.
I think one of the very important pieces to the descriptive teaching model is brainstorming. I think it's easy for us to get stuck on a word or stuck on a concept, and being able to toss that out there to your classroom staff and saying, okay, what are those core words that we can help to reinforce this concept? Using the charts, the one from Gail Van Tatenhove or the ones from Smekens Education Solutions, to help really spell it out for you so you have it in front of you, helps to grow that understanding of how you can utilize those core vocabulary words to gain immense understanding of multiple different processes, words, expressions that your students need to be able to utilize and be able to explore their educational opportunities.
Do you have any questions?
We want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we hope you guys